We're going to talk about Michigan. Just before we actually discuss why it's so important, just to tell people what is actually happening there. So there is this primary election on the Democratic side that is hugely important, isn't it? And it's taking place next week. And it's a primary election to decide who the candidate is going to be for the Senate seat. And the reason why it's open is that the Democratic senator is actually retiring, so is out of the picture. So it is an open seat. The Democrats have had it in the past, but they haven't got someone who has been the senator in the fight this time. So they've got to make a choice, and that person is they're going to face off against the Republican candidate in the midterm elections. So, Sumi, it seems to me there are two reasons why Michigan really matters a lot. Mm-hmm. And the first is simply that they got to win it in the Senate race.
It's Michigan. I mean, every election cycle, we end up talking about Michigan. It's one of those classic purple states. It's a swing state. You have really progressive parts of Michigan, which I know you know from traveling through the U.S. as well. And you have really conservative parts of Michigan. And it has come back into focus because, of course, the tariffs discussion on the car industry, reviving American manufacturing, a lot of that discussion. We saw President Trump travel to Michigan, didn't we, just last week. So a lot of that discussion has been focused on Michigan. And because it's such an important state, you always see Democrats and Republicans pour tons of money and energy into winning that state. So that's the first reason. But all the more important in this midterms is the Democrats want to try to win the Senate back, don't they? Obviously, it looks like they have a decent path to win back the House of Representatives. The Senate is going to be a trickier, more uphill battle. And one of those crucial seats that they have to defend is, as you said, Senator Gary Peters, a long-serving Democrat, is stepping down. And so the race to replace him has become this fascinating battle on the Democratic side in particular. And once, of course, that hurdle is passed and they pick who will be on the ticket, then they move on, obviously, to the battle to keep that seat. But it just has raised the importance of this state once again.
Yeah. And you mentioned the state is purple. Michigan voted for Trump,
yes,
didn't it, in 24?
Yes.
But at the same time, you think of at the governor level,
yep,
and to an extent, I suppose, in the Senate level as well. I'm trying to think whether there have been many Republicans from Michigan in recent years. It is genuine. In other words, I suppose what I'm saying is when you say purple, that mixture of red for the Republicans and blue for the Democrats, it actually really is, isn't it? People still, to an extent, even split their tickets.
Yeah. That's what also makes Michigan so fascinating. As you said, they have a really popular Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer, someone who's been talked about as a possible presidential candidate down the road and even previously. Some of that is the holdover of Michigan having this strong working class, tradition that has been tied in the past to Democrats, unions, and so on and so forth. And that has shifted in the Trump era, in the MAGA kind of more economic populist era as well, so that Michigan's colors have shifted a bit as well. But because of that past and that present, you get a mixed bag. And it's so rare to see a split ticket these days, but Michigan is a place where it happens. There are others, Kentucky is a deep red state, but has a Democrat governor, right? But it is, in these times, fairly unusual.
Yeah. And when you come to the importance of this in the Senate, just to completely underline this point before we go on to the other reason why it really matters, if they don't win Michigan, they will not win the Senate back, will they? It's really as clear as that. Just as we were saying about the state of Maine, and we did an entire episode on Maine, yep, and Anthony had been there and all the rest of it, and the Democrats have plainly got difficulties in Maine, though they could still win it. But they absolutely need to win Maine, they need to win Texas, they need to win Michigan.
They do. In fact, Republicans, as we know, they have 53 seats right now in the Senate. The Democrats have 47. So they need to flip 4 seats to be able to take the Senate. And if they are to have any chance to do so, they have to hold on to Michigan. They're looking at other avenues. Could they possibly win in Alaska? Could they possibly win in Iowa? But those are stretches. And being able to hold on to that Senate seat in Michigan is absolutely critical for any chance they have.
Yeah. The other reason why it really matters, I think in a way, is the more interesting one to people. So we can talk about the midterm elections and the need to win and all the rest of it. People understand that. But the thing that is really interesting about Michigan that you couldn't really entirely say about Maine or about Texas or about some of the other places that they want to win this time round is just this incredible ideological clash. Yeah. It's so clear, isn't it? And it matters this time round because it matters that they get a candidate who's capable of winning in November. But oh my goodness, Sumi, it matters in the longer term, the next presidential election. I think you could even make the case that it matters for the future of American politics because it's about whether the Democrats are going to be, in a sense, just throwing everything up in the air and going for a candidate who's outside the mainstream. I mean, it seems to me that they have a set of decisions to make, not only about policy, but about the degree of aggression almost that they show to the electorate. Say, come on, do this because this is the right way to do it. We're not pandering to you anymore because we're not interested in the middle ground. Or am I overstating it a bit?
No, we've talked in the past with the rise of President Trump about the soul of the Republican Party. Right now, we're talking about the soul of the Democratic Party. It is no less than that. You're absolutely right. I think this is fascinating to watch. And it has really riled the Democratic Party. I mean, if you look simply at the debates that they're having between lawmakers on what does the Democratic Party stand for, if it's a big tent party, who can be included in that tent and who cannot be? This is about the identity of the party. And there are a lot of questions asked after 2024, and indeed previous to that in 2016 when President Trump went as well, as to which direction the party should head in. And the battle we're seeing in Michigan is precisely about that. Do the Democrats pick up a more populist, more progressive agenda, or do they continue with more centrist candidates who they think might be able to win back some Republicans? It is fascinating to watch again, and I think you see the different factions of the party being played out on a national scale, and the perfect microcosm for it is in Michigan right now.
Okay, so the two candidates. Abdul El-Sayed, he's the progressive guy. He's a doctor, public health official, very, very good online. There's a bit of the kind of Mamdani.
He's incredibly media savvy. He's great at interviews, absolutely, and debates as well, as we're going to talk about.
Yeah. And on the other side, Haley Stevens, who, I mean, frankly, I know much less about. And that, in a way, tells you something about the two of them, because obviously I keep an eye on stuff and you see things online and you see debates and all the rest of it. But I can't entirely say that I know as much about Haley Stevens. And I think for Americasters who know anything about either of these things, it would probably be the same, that she has less of a profile, but a really important role now in this.
She does. So I've interviewed Haley Stevens a few times on a number of issues, from Ukraine, where she's a staunch supporter of Ukraine, to tariffs, for example, because Michigan obviously hit hard by tariffs on Canada, and she is a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. She is someone who is a Michigander, as they call themselves. I'm probably going to get some angry emails now from Michigan saying you pronounce that wrong. I'm from upstate New York. What can I say? But she is she has really built a well and base of support among kind of the traditional Democrat class in Michigan, and has also worked with her fellow lawmakers on some of the more progressive issues in Congress, and that's something she's been pointing to. But she doesn't have, as you said, a national profile until this race,
right?
And if you look at the progressive side of it, Abdul El-Sayed has gotten, endorsements from Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So he's one of the faces of the progressive left wing of the party. Haley Stevens has almost been made out on social media, certainly, to be a caricature of the centrist Democrat. And she's almost, if you see in recent weeks, she's gotten a lot of sympathy for some of the criticism she's gotten online. She was caught running down the halls of Congress, and she was, so a reporter stopped her and she said, "Oh, are you going to make fun of me again?" And that clip went viral because she said, "Are you going to make fun of my accent?" Because she has this real Michigan accent. And, she has real Michigan phrases, the way she speaks. But that appeals to people in Michigan because she's from there. And it's also made her, in a way, a sympathetic character to some who say, well, the progressive wing has really excoriated her for being a centrist, and that's unfair. Now, on the other hand, Abdul El-Sayed's team and his supporters would say, well, she doesn't represent what people want to see right now.
We ought to listen to the two of them having a go at each other, just to kind of get a sense of what they say about each other and what they're saying about the future too. So this is Haley Stevens, Abdul El-Sayed, at their final debate. It took place on Monday.
Abdul is running for celebrity. Republicans are propping up his campaign. And Mike Rogers just the other day said in a secret phone call that he makes it easier for him to win, that he's the one he wants to run against.
So I just want to say the difference between us is $46 million of AIPAC spending. They've set a record in this race to help elect my opponent because they know that she'll be a reliable vote, just like she took last week to send your tax dollars to a foreign government.
And we should say they mentioned Mike Rogers. He's a Republican candidate and he's running unopposed. So he's the person that either Haley Stevens or Abdul al-Sayed will face in the general election. But it is the issue of funding from AIPAC and the question of American support for Israel that once again, this massive, foreign policy issue that has once again really driven a wedge in the Democratic Party.
We ought to explain what AIPAC is, because it's been around a long time, hasn't it? But basically it funds candidates, it funds causes in the United States that support the state of Israel.
And we should say that AIPAC stands for the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, for those who are not familiar with the organization.
Yeah, and it's been around a long time.
That's right. And it has supported a number of candidates. And of course, in the past, that hasn't been as much of an issue for Democratic candidates or Republican candidates. But in particular, since October 7th and, the war between Israel and Hamas, and in particular, Israel's operations in Gaza and the killing of tens of thousands of civilians has really ushered in this new divide in the Democratic Party, where you still have those who support Israel and those who support Israel's actions and do receive money from AIPAC. That's Haley Stevens being one of them. And those who say we no longer will receive money from AIPAC and we don't support the state of Israel's actions in Gaza and now in the war in Lebanon as well.
Yeah. And that division, when you, never mind the midterms, look ahead. Look at the primaries for the presidential fight in 28. Can you imagine? I mean, it is going to be really bitter, isn't it? And very personal and very divisive. This just on the Democratic side, this business of, do you support Israel? To what extent do you support Israel? What do you think is acceptable? And they had a vote in Congress, didn't they, recently in the Senate, where the Democrats split over whether to send military equipment to Israel. And in the end, it gets passed because the Republicans say yes, and some Democrats say no, and some Democrats say yes. And that's going to be the fight, isn't it, in the primary?
It was an amendment to a national security bill, and it was an amendment that had been brought up by those who have been critical of Israeli policies. And the question was, would you strip Israel of not only military funding, but also humanitarian aid?
Yes.
And this was such an interesting vote to watch because you had Democrats like Nancy Pelosi who voted in favor of the amendment. And she said she had some qualms because she didn't want to strip the humanitarian aid, but it came together in this amendment. And there were more than 100 Democrats who voted for, and some Republicans as well. It ended up failing because the remaining Democrats and almost all Republicans voted it down. But regardless, tells us a lot about the debate in the party.
So the debate in the party. Al-Sayed has been pretty plain, hasn't he, in Michigan about his view of Israel. He certainly doesn't like the Israeli prime minister, but I think it's fair to say it goes further than Netanyahu. It goes to the actual state of Israel and its behavior.
He's been asked about this, and what I find really interesting is he has said in the past, look, I don't want our tax dollars going to support the policies of the Israeli government. And he brings it back to, he says, we shouldn't support, for example, the way that Egypt uses its military weapons against its people as well. And so it's not specifically Israel, but indeed it is because in Michigan, and we know in Michigan in 2024, this was a really central issue for many voters there as well. I went and spoke to some voters there as well who were really upset about the Biden administration's continued support for Israel during the war and as the war played out in Gaza as well. They're well aware of just how it resonates with voters in Michigan as well.
So Al-Sayed has this line, doesn't he, about his own view of Israel and its behavior, but he has campaigned alongside, for instance, Hassan Piker, this guy who, I mean, if Marianne were here, she'd be laughing at me now, but I'm trying to explain what he's on Twitch, which is a thing.
Better you than me.
Okay. Well, I will. It won't be better me than you, but I'll give it a go. So Twitch is this thing where you basically just put your life online, and Hassan Piker is very, very successful, very well known among a certain sort of cohort, isn't he, of younger progressive Democrats. But he's also, it is fair to say, has said things in the past that many Americans would find outrageous about 9/11.
Yeah.
Apparently at one stage he said he thought Hamas was better than Israel. So all sorts of things that he is semi-resiled from, but only semi. And the question for outside from more centrist Democrats is, how can you go and campaign with these people and keep us on a path that is relatively moderate? And I think that, in the end, in this fight, in this primary election, if people are being asked to make a distinction between the two of them, that seems to me to be one of the big things. It's not so much the actual policies, it's just how big are you willing for the tent to be? Where are you willing to go to get your support?
Yeah, and we should say that, for many Jewish Americans in particular, they see the comments that Hassan Piker has made in the past as truly anti-Semitic. And, there's been a call by some Democrats to ensure that all Democrats distance themselves from him. But again, he does have a massive following. So particularly somebody like Abdul al-Sayed has said, well, this is someone who has also captured part of our base. And I was speaking to a Democratic analyst and someone who had worked previously in the Obama administration and is tied to the Jewish American community. And he has said, this is something that, on the one hand, obviously we understand the opposition to the state of Israel, but you are also making Jewish Americans uncomfortable and feel unsafe at a time where you're seeing anti-Semitic incidents across the country on the rise. So it's not just, of course, about foreign policy, but it's about how Jewish Americans then also identify with the Democratic Party or not. And so that's part of why this has been such a difficult issue for the party now as well. And now you have this new name attached to the Democratic Party, which is the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA. And that has added another layer to what the Democrats see as their identity moving forward. Are they socialists? Are they not?
Yeah. Now, he's not formally a member.
That's right.
Is he? Of the
Abdul
DSA?
al-Sayed is not.
Yeah,
That's right.
which surprised me. I only discovered that the other day,
Yeah.
actually, because he's so closely associated with their staff. I don't know why he isn't a member, but anyway, he isn't a member. Because lots of people who are in the DSA say, it's what it says on the tin. They are actual socialists and they believe in socialism.
Yeah.
And they like the sort of things. You look at Mamdani opening his state shops in New York now, which is, he would say, socialism, and designed to be upset about that. Al-Sayed says he's a capitalist and not a socialist, but he's very closely involved, isn't he, with this group that you mentioned, the DSA.
Yeah.
In my time in the States, so in the early noughties, the DSA were there, but they were very much on the fringes, actually, of the Democratic Party. They kind of mattered a little bit occasionally. It just seems to me that, exactly as you're saying, that this is their moment, because if Al-Sayed wins this primary, and particularly if he then goes ahead and wins the general in Michigan in the autumn, my goodness, I mean, yes, they've had a success in New York, but this is a really major league thing. And it seems to me that they've got a success then with a guy who absolutely could be a presidential candidate in the future, and certainly from within Congress have this kind of power base that the moderates in the party will find very difficult to get past. That, in a sense, is why this matters so much, isn't it?
Indeed. You've seen some of the more traditional Democrats really anxious about the rise of the DSA. Of course, Zohran Mamdani is his own phenomenon, isn't he? And you have to think about the fact that when he won, and we saw these DSA candidates also win in New York, a number of Democrats who are more on the centrist part of the party said, well, look, what happens in New York, it can't happen elsewhere. But we are seeing it, the movement rise elsewhere. Abdul al-Sayed is not a DSA member, as you said, but he shares a lot of the progressive agenda with them. But we saw, Colorado as well, where a DSA candidate won. And so, for the party, there is real concern that this could be picked up immediately by Republicans and used as their platform.
Yeah,
in the midterms.
and the reason being that some of the DSA platform is quite out there, isn't it? It is fair to say it is outside what we have previously thought of as the American mainstream when it comes to politics. And it's a good opportunity, actually, just to hear what it is. So they want a new constitution. They want really big changes. And conveniently, their co-chair, Megan Romer, was on Fox News with Shannon Bream recently, in fact, earlier this week. And this, I think, is an absolutely fascinating exchange.
Okay, so we're going to put up on the screen a few of the things that are part of your platform. And I want to ask you, just give me sort of a true or false on these. Abolish the Senate.
True.
Okay, replace the presidency and Supreme Court as we now know them.
Yep.
Abolish ICE.
Absolutely.
Abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. illegally.
As a long-term plan, yep.
Defund the Pentagon.
Absolutely.
Et cetera, et cetera.
There's a lot there to pick through, isn't there? There really is.
And as you were saying, there's a lot there for the Republicans to pick through. And that, I suppose, is the point, isn't it?
We should say, there are a number of progressive candidates and indeed DSA candidates who don't ascribe to all of that entire list, let's say, of priorities, shall we say?
Because generally you say it's all about the cost of living. It's all about affordability.
Yes.
And you don't stress any of this. Look at Mamdani. He doesn't go on about all of these things.
No.
So it was a reveal that a lot of other socialists, actually, on the Democratic side would not have appreciated. But nonetheless, it has been revealed. It's there. It's true.
And, there are a few points there, like abolish ICE, that DSA candidates absolutely do approve of. And beyond that, many progressive candidates approve of. But abolish the Senate, the Pentagon, abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. illegally. There's a lot there. I saw a few statements on social media by Democrat lawmakers who are not on the very progressive wing of the party. You said, can we make clear that this does not stand for the Democrat agenda? You sense that nervousness because these are clearly pretty radical policies that are being espoused here. And the real worry there is that people will go to the polls in November and say, well, I can't vote for these policies, or I can't vote for a candidate who might then start embracing these policies down the road, right? How will this change our politics? Fascinating to watch. And, maybe 10 years ago, somebody would write this off as just kind of a fringe political group, but not anymore. Not anymore, right?
Yeah. Because I suppose the other question is genuinely, what do we know about whether these things might be popular in America now, or maybe more popular than they were once?
Yeah, I suppose you could go through some of those points that we heard in that Fox News interview and put them to the American public in polling. But most polling that we see indicates that the majority of Americans are somewhere in the center. They're neither on the far right even now, nor are they on the far left. But what has proven popular is economic populism. Yeah. And I think that's where the DSA and more progressive parts of the left-wing party, and to be honest, also the MAGA movement as well, has been able to change the tide a bit. And those are the elements they're picking up on. And interesting to hear Abdul El-Sayed make the point, look, the Democratic policies of the last 10 years clearly haven't worked. Yes, Joe Biden was elected, but that was in a way in response to President Trump. That's what Abdul El-Sayed says, and his supporters. But clearly, the traditional moderate centrist Democrat path is not where people are. The reason we're getting elected is because people are angry. They're, angry with their institutions. They're angry with the establishment, the political class, and that is what we're capturing right now. What it means for Michigan, it'll be really interesting to watch who comes out of this primary. And I think it will give us a good indication of where the party is right now.
Do we know, because there was a reference, wasn't there, in when we were listening to the debate that they had, a reference to the Republican candidate and this secret conversation. I'm not sure how secret it really was, but this conversation that was leaked.
Mike Rogers,
Mike Rogers. And Mike Rogers is saying, I'd like to stand against outside, basically, that he would be the easier person to be. Do we know from polling, though, whether that's true?
No. If you look at the Cook Political Report at the moment, it rates the open Senate race as a toss-up.
Right.
Now, that is, of course, knowing that it's either going to be Abdul El-Sayed or Haley Stevens. That being said, you do see Republicans who say Abdul El-Sayed would be the much easier candidate to face. We hope it is him and not Haley Stevens, because they see a more centrist Democrat like Haley Stevens as someone who can appeal to more Michiganders. Yeah. Whether that truly is the case, and there is this undercurrent of a protest movement of people who would vote for the progressive candidate, we don't know just yet. Yeah. But right now, the polling indicates it's a toss-up.
Yeah. God, it really is. And we've been talking, or I've been talking, as if El-Sayed, if he wins the primary, is likely to win. But of course, it's perfectly possible he wins the primary and then loses.
Yeah.
And that then means, in the Democratic Party, a real bloodletting where everyone turns on the progressives and says, you've lost us a seat we had to win. We're done for.
Well, and the same could happen if Haley Stevens wins the primary and then goes to lose the general election. Then there's a bloodletting from the progressives who say, see, we told you so. Had you selected a progressive candidate, we would have won. It makes me think of 2016 when all the Bernie bros said, had we been the Democratic candidate, we would have beaten Donald Trump.
Bernie himself, he's told me, not far from this studio. I interviewed Bernie a few years ago and I said to him, I thought he might hedge it a bit. I said, would you have won in 2016? He said, yes, absolutely, I would have done.
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he?
Yeah, well, he would, but I mean, he then came out with the reasons why. And I must say, I've always found it very convincing, actually. I think he probably would have done in 2016. But in a sense, because he epitomizes, and this is where the outside people, I think, have a real point, that one of the things that has happened is that the Democrats, if you put policies to one side and abolishing the police and prisons and all the rest of it, but when you just put the kind of vigor with which they make the case for the common person. Yeah. That actually they say, particularly in the Obama years, and they really can't stand Obama, a lot of his people. That fascinates me. I was talking to someone who is a big supporter of Al-Said the other day. Just couldn't find a single positive thing to say about Barack Obama or anyone who'd been around in those days, because they think that there were opportunities there for the Democrats to really, and the person I was talking to was talking specifically about the bank bailouts that happened after the financial crash, and Obama, no one went to jail from Wall Street is the line that all these people have. What were we Democrats thinking about in those days? And they just want a more aggressive, common person stance taken, and they see in people like Mamdani, obviously, but Al-Sayed as well, they see this willingness not to be apologetic, not to be constantly kind of apologizing in the way that Democrats used to be constantly apologetic about not backing defense expenditure enough, that they always felt on the defensive when it came to those things. Well, they say, the heck with all of that. We're not going to be defensive about anything anymore. And I can see that being genuinely appealing.
I can as well when they especially look across the aisle and see how President Trump has won with a completely unapologetic agenda, right? And it is that kind of pushing forward against all odds that has worked for the Republicans. And they say the Democrats need to build their own playbook that can run on a similar style. And it's interesting. I always find it fascinating when President Trump, and he said this when Zohran Mamdani was visiting the White House, that fascinating exchange with the two of them there. And he said,
they liked each other.
They did. He still calls him handsome and charming and all the rest, which President Trump loves. But he also said, you'd be surprised. Bernie Sanders and I had some of the same policies back in 2016. Yeah. And he's pointing to some of those economic populist messages, for example, the rebuilding of American manufacturing and growth of American jobs again. And that's what he's pointing to. It's that populist agenda. And that's what Bernie Sanders was running on back then. And that's why he talks about that overlap between the two. Again, where some of the MAGA movement and the progressive movement, their policies can overlap.
Meanwhile, in Michigan, so they held the primary.
Yep.
We'll get a winner. And then you get the general election campaign and a ton of money being spent, presumably on both sides. And what fascinates me is that when we get to the midterms, and the headline will be that the Democrats have or haven't retaken the House, have or haven't retaken the Senate. But this is one of those fascinating battle within the wider war things that is really going to tell us a lot. So number one, we will know by then who the Democrat is. But number two, as we've been saying about both candidates, basically both candidates, if that person wins or loses, it will have implications that go well beyond these midterms.
It will. And I'm going to be really curious to watch some of the segments of the voting population, the Hispanic vote. How does the Black vote turn out? How do young men turn out? Young voters have been such an important group to watch in recent years. So all of this, how it plays out in Michigan, will be critical for understanding the midterms and then understanding the presidential race in 2028. So a lot to look out for in this race.
Sumi, it's been a pleasure to talk to you in the worldwide headquarters.
Thank you for having me here. I'd love to come back.
Safe travels
if I
back.
may. Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.